Hey everyone, it's Bee, and you're listening to another episode of the In Your Feelings podcast. For those of you who are new here, In Your Feelings is a podcast I created alongside Thought Catalog that dives into the very real and messy and sometimes daunting aspects of life that we are all navigating together. And I create these episodes just to have honest conversations about things like relationships and moving on and worthiness, things that can feel really disheartening and confusing. And I want to dive into these conversations and I want to create this kind of content in the hopes that it just makes you feel less alone and that it reminds you that you aren't the only person who is dealing with certain things in life. And with that being said, today I want to talk about forgiveness. And I want to talk about forgiveness, especially right now, because I feel like we've been given such an opportunity to reflect on ourselves and turn our thoughts inwards. And while this is a beautifully positive thing, being given the space to really connect with how far we've come in life and how much we've overcome and how much strength we've had throughout our journeys, I do think that these moments of rest and that these moments of uncertainty can also have a negative impact on our reflection. We might start to think about who we were in the past and mull over all of the things we could have done better, all of the ways we could have done more or less, or, all of the ways we could have spoken up, all of the what ifs. Periods of reflection can be really overwhelming because we're sitting with our thoughts. And if we don't learn how to give ourselves permission to let go of them, or to let go of who we were in the past, to really set those actions down, to be gentle with the way we've navigated our healing or our lives as we were just trying to figure out how to move forward within them, we'll really start to allow for resentment and regret to take over. So I wanted to create a podcast that will hopefully inspire you to reframe your past and encourage you to forgive yourself for the things you might be regretting or overthinking right now. I wanted to create a podcast that would remind you that you fought to be here and that it's okay how you got here and that it's okay to give yourself permission to embrace the lessons you've learned instead of vilifying yourself for them. And on that note, my first little reminder is to just forgive yourself for the things that you changed your mind about. Forgive yourself for changing, for being a different person than you were a year ago or 3 months ago or even a week ago. Forgive yourself for wanting different things and for maybe stepping away from the goals or the dreams or the people you fought to manifest in your life. You have to understand that change is something to embrace because it means that you're taking inventory of the things in your life that are fulfilling you and bringing you joy on a fundamental level. At the end of the day, continuing to fulfill a dream that's no longer fulfilling you is only taking you away from discovering the thing that is genuinely going to get you out of bed in the morning. And at the end of the day, staying in a relationship because you feel obligated to stay, because you feel like you wanted it at one point, because you have invested time into it, is not standing up for your heart, is not respecting the fact that sometimes our dreams and our hearts and our concepts of love or what we need in a specific season changes. As a human being who is constantly growing and constantly learning and constantly changing their perception of the world around them, you can't expect yourself to want the same things you did once before. You can't expect the things that were fulfilling you or working for you to do the same within a different season of your life. And I know sometimes it's extremely difficult to see change, to see that difference within your own soul and your own desires as a good thing. But it is a good thing. It's the best thing because it means that you're learning. It means that you're asking questions. It means that you're not settling in your life. It means that you're not just taking a back seat to the way you crash your heart into this world. It means that you're asking for more. It means that you're genuinely trying your best to figure out what deserves to stay in your life, instead of just keeping things within it because they're there. So that's my first reminder. Forgive yourself for changing. And more importantly, be the person who changes. Because when you are the person who changes, it means that you're the person who's growing. And instead of vilifying yourself for that, instead of feeling like you're falling away from yourself, use this transformation as a reminder that you're actually falling into yourself, that you're actually chasing the kind of life that is going to be the best reflection of the season you're in. And don't fear that change. Don't get so comfortable in your life that you aren't moving at all, that you aren't taking chances or asking questions about how the things within it are truly and deeply making you feel. Wish for change. It doesn't mean that you're lost. It means that you're finding yourself. Okay, so my next little reminder is to simply just forgive yourself for giving your heart to the people who could not love it or value it. Forgive yourself for falling for the wrong people. Because at the end of the day, they weren't the wrong people. You were meant to meet them. You were meant to fall for them. You were meant to experience them and learn from the lesson. You don't have to regret the way you put your heart into the world. You don't have to vilify yourself for feeling and for caring and for hoping that something beautiful you felt with another human being would turn into something real and tangible and pointed. And the truth is, we don't always end up with the people who make us feel deeply in life. I've said this so many times. Sometimes people come into our lives and they love us so beautifully. They prove to us that there is goodness within the hearts of others. But sometimes people come into our lives and they love us like hurricanes. And they fill our hearts with doubt and dishonesty, and their actions cloud our minds. They make us question ourselves and question our worth and question if we love too hard or if we feel too deeply or if we are simply too much to hold. And the hardest lesson you will ever have to learn is that this too is a gift. To have been loved in halves. To have been loved by someone who could not understand what it meant to hold such a rare and hopeful thing is to have been loved by someone who taught you how to walk away. How to choose yourself for once. How to stand up for your worth and for the way you exist in this world. At the end of the day, they may not have loved you, but they did teach you how to survive the wreckage, how to endure the storm, and how to rebuild. They may not have loved you, but they still showed you that you could risk your heart. You still tried for something. You still believed, and that is courage, that is strength, that is bravery. And that shouldn't be a regret, but rather that should be something you embrace as your superpower. And, I understand, I get it. I know how hard it can be to see that. How shame can fill a human being when you connect with the fact that maybe you didn't stand up for what your heart deserved. Maybe you stayed longer than you knew you should have. I understand what it is like to just wish that you had seen the signs, or to just wish you could have walked away before the damage was done, before the lesson was learned in a really hard and haunted way. I get it. And at the end of the day, when you care deeply, when you're empathetic, when you believe in love and the beauty of another human being so deeply, sometimes you can convince yourself to stay longer than you should, or to keep trying or to not give up, but that isn't something to be ashamed of. Please, I hope if there's one thing you take away from this, it's that. As I said before, you tried for something, but you also maybe learned how to set boundaries, how to go forward with your heart and protect it, not in a way that is guarded and hardened to the world, but rather in a way that is informed, that helps for it to be protected and nurtured, that doesn't let it settle for things that aren't for it. Because now you know what you don't want. Now you know what you don't want to feel. Now you know the kinds of things you crave, the respect you deserve, and you won't settle for the opposite any longer. Forgive yourself for how you got to that understanding. And while you're forgiving yourself for maybe putting your heart into the hands of someone who could not hold it, I want you to forgive yourself for walking away from certain people who you yourself couldn't love properly. Forgive yourself for taking your love back. Forgive yourself for outgrowing certain people in your life. We so often regret this, especially as empathetic, deep feelers, because we've been taught that to love someone is to love them in any way, shape, or form. To leave someone is to give up on them, we think. We've convinced ourselves that to walk away is to abandon someone who needs us, to leave them out in the cold, to not be the person in this world who is taking care of others and showing up for that kind of tenderness and hope in this world. And this is something I really, really struggle with. I used to regret so many situations where I truly had to protect my energy. I used to think it was bad. I used to think I was in the wrong. I hated those moments where I had to choose myself, where in staying and in trying to fight harder and give more and be more and fix and save, I only ever depleted myself to the point of actually not being able to love the people I was doing that for properly. It got to the point where my heart was so emotionally exhausted, it was ripping pieces of itself apart just to pour those pieces back into another person, hoping that it would heal them and nourish them and make them better or happier. And we do this so often. We try so hard to save the people we love. But in order to do that, sometimes you have to walk away. Because you cannot fix the people you love. You cannot heal them. They have to do that on their own. And if someone isn't showing up for that healing, if they're content with having you hold them together, then that will only ever ruin you. It will deplete you. It will exhaust you. And walking away to refuel yourself, giving your heart a break, allowing for it to be yours and only yours, allowing for the love you so desperately poured into another human being to be poured back into yourself, that is something I need you to forgive yourself for. Because not only were you choosing to nurture yourself, but in the most backwards way, in a way that will take a long time for you to understand, you were also helping this person. And sometimes the best way we love people is by leaving them be and laying down our hope and our fight and knowing when to wave the white flag and have them show up for themselves. You were not put here to fix people. It is okay to walk away from relationships that require you to do so. Forgive yourself for that. And also, along these lines, forgive yourself for the mistakes you made in love, for the hearts you fumbled with when you were trying to navigate your feelings, for the people you hurt, for the people who maybe deserved better from you. I can sit here all day and tell you that you deserved more than to be left or hurt or taken advantage of, but we are all human beings and we have all made mistakes that have wounded others in love. We have all been the person who hurts at some point. There's no doubt in my mind of that. And that's something that just requires us to sit down and to really come to terms with ourselves. You don't have to vilify yourself for the way you navigated love in the past, for the way your heart was learning and tripping over itself. To be aware and to understand that these things were mistakes, that there were better approaches, that you could have maybe been more honest or more gentle with someone who wanted to love you or be loved by you. That is an incredible reflection to have. And it does not need to exist within negativity. You were learning. Let it go and do better in the future. Stand up for that. Let it go and understand that seeing these things as mistakes or as moments in love that you could have been more tender just means that you've grown into that tenderness. Just means that your heart has matured. And there is hope in that. There's grace in that. So forgive yourself. Okay, so while we're on the topic of how you treated others and forgiving yourself for that, I want you to try your best to forgive yourself for the way you treated yourself in the past, for the way you talked to your body, for the way you vilified the way your mind worked when you were dealing with anxiety or overthinking or depression or anything that was haunting it. Forgive yourself for the way you maybe settled for less than what you wanted or desired or knew you needed because you didn't think you deserved it. Because you convinced yourself somewhere along the line that you were not worthy of beauty in your life. That you were not worthy of happiness or goodness or having the things you wanted to come to fruition. Forgive yourself for the way you held yourself back because you didn't believe in your own potential. Because you didn't believe in your capacity to take up space. Forgive yourself for maybe allowing for all of the things you didn't say or didn't wear or didn't do because you were afraid of how it made you look, because you were afraid of what others might think of you. Forgive yourself for that. And forgive yourself for the way you didn't show up for yourself, for the ways in which you maybe held yourself back, for the ways in which you didn't see just how beautiful or worthy you were, for the ways in which you made yourself smaller. Forgive yourself for the ways you treated yourself and vow to show up for yourself now. Vow to take up space, no matter how ready you feel. No matter what you look like or how prepared you are or how worthy you feel of the things you want. Vow to remind yourself of your worthiness whenever that doubt creeps into your mind. Vow to leap even when your legs are trembling. Vow to be kinder to yourself, to speak to yourself the way you speak to your friends. To not fill your mind with self-hate or negative self-talk, but rather to cultivate within it kindness and gratitude and tenderness. To be proud of who you are, even if it's not who you want to be right now or where you want to be. Vow to always believe in your own potential. Just please vow to love yourself. Okay, obviously getting emotional because this hits so home for me on so many levels, and I hope that these reminders are hitting home for you and that they're helping you, but I do have one more, and that is to forgive yourself for the ways in which you've had to fight through the pain of navigating all that is heavy and messy and confusing in this life. And there are so many things we deal with as human beings, so many things that are jarring and come out of nowhere. Things we may not know how to cope with or deal with or come to terms with. We are constantly being met by learning opportunities, by things in life that will pull us in so many different directions and that will make us question our capacity to get through it. So do not vilify yourself for the ways in which you had to fight through your sadness, for the ways in which you had to learn how to quiet your mind and navigate all that was trying to bury you. Forgive yourself for what you had to do in order to survive. Whatever you had to do to make it to tomorrow, whatever you had to do in order to ensure that you were safe and protected, that you were going to be able to wake up in the morning, that was necessary. That was needed. You had to fight for yourself. And sometimes when we're dealing with all that is confusing and haunted in this world, when we're dealing with situations we have never experienced before, we don't know how to approach them. And sometimes we can vilify ourselves for maybe having to rest more than we thought we should, or for maybe having to walk away from certain people or certain dynamics in order to choose ourselves and to choose our healing. Sometimes we have to do things we aren't necessarily proud of in a moment in order to keep going. So please forgive yourself for the ways in which you fought. Forgive yourself for the ways in which you had to save yourself. Forgive yourself for doing whatever you had to do to ensure that you made it to see another day. It is okay if you hid from the world. It is okay if you weren't as productive as you needed to be. It is okay if you let relationships slip or if you let yourself slip. It is okay if you felt depressed or sad or anxious as you navigated your healing. It is okay. However you fought your wars, whatever got you here today is valid. You had to do what you had to do. Congratulate yourself on having the courage to do all of that, even if it was not graceful. Even if it could have been executed in a kinder way or a more gentle way, even if you see now that you could have done things differently, it is okay. Be gentle with yourself because you were learning and you still are. Forgive yourself for all of the ways you had to come towards those lessons. Okay, I think that's a good place to end this podcast episode. I hope that whatever you're dealing with right now in your mind, whatever you're thinking back on, whatever what ifs you're mulling over, whatever, concepts are spiraling in your head or memories are spiraling in your head, I hope that this podcast kind of helped to bring your inward thinking outward and helped you to change your perspective on the things that you had to do in order to get here today. And I know being in isolation and I know being in quarantine can really make you overthink who you are and where you're going and where you've been and what you've done and who you've loved, etc., etc., etc. I read all of your messages. I understand it is difficult. I understand it is hard. And I wanted to create an episode that hopefully helped to make you feel a little ease within all of this, helped to crack a little light into those thoughts and into those memories and maybe change your perspective on them a little. Because you are so worthy of being okay with who you had to be and being okay with the things that you did while you were learning. You are so worthy of that kind of gentleness and that kind of understanding and that kind of kindness towards yourself. And I hope this episode just drove that point home. So thank you so much for being here today, and I can't wait to talk to all of you next week. Until then, stay safe and be gentle with yourself.